Good afternoon. Welcome to the Chesapeake Foodshed Network's Coffee Talks series, Learning and Connecting for Action. My name is Yona Sipos, and I direct the program development for the Chesapeake Foodshed Network, which is coordinated by Local Concepts, a consulting firm providing the development and backbone support for the CFN. I'm joined today by Christy Gabbard, who owns Local Concepts and coordinates the network. Before we jump into the coffee talk, I'll provide a very brief overview of the CFN. The Chesapeake Foodshed Network is a group of organizations, businesses, funders, agencies, and other change agents working across the Chesapeake watershed to build a stronger and more resilient food system. We're a relatively new initiative, about 2 years in the making, and the leadership group that spurred the network's development did so because they recognized that a great deal of extraordinary work was being done to advance our regional food system, and yet there was no entity intentionally trying to build connections, trust, and relationships among those out there doing the work. So the mission of the CFN is to catalyze connections and collaborations that help to build a sustainable, resilient, inclusive, and equitable regional food system in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. We believe that by catalyzing connections and collaborations, we are stronger together, such that we can help to accelerate change in and across our food system. We encourage conversation and connection in various ways, including via social media. Please note the usernames and hashtags on the slide footers. We would love to see your tweets. So here is a picture of our network building blocks. The foundation of our network is all about building connections, getting to know one another, sharing information and knowledge, building relationships and trust, with the thought that as we know one another better, we might over time see opportunities to align and ultimately to work collectively toward action. So we invite anyone who supports our vision of a sustainable, resilient, inclusive, and equitable regional food system to participate in the Chesapeake Foodshed Network. So what are the CFN Coffee Talks? The Coffee Talks are funded by the Town Creek Foundation to develop a platform that the network can use to help catalyze connections around specific food system topics. We partner with resource experts who provide a quick learning opportunity through a webinar presentation. And then during the webinar and in the follow-up materials, we identify ways for people to continue to dig in deeper and to engage further around that particular topic. Today's Coffee Talk is an opportunity for all of us to learn more about farm worker issues and rights, particularly within the context of sustainable agriculture. We are delighted that at last count, over 80 people across the US had registered for this talk. The presenters today include two incredibly experienced and insightful farm worker rights advocates, Jessica Culley and Leila Borrero Krouse from CATA, the Farmworkers Support Committee. And I'll introduce them further in just a moment, but first I'll just note a few housekeeping items. If you have questions or comments during the webinar, we invite you to type them into the questions box in your GoToWebinar control panel. Christy will be collecting your questions and will share them with our presenters following their presentation in the question and answer period. Next week, the Chesapeake Foodshed Network will share a recording of the presentation, any additional Q&A, resources, contacts, and a post-webinar survey, which we would be very grateful if you would fill in with your feedback and insights. And while just going back to the topic of the control panel, I also wanted to point out that there are two handouts in the under the handout section. And those will also be made available with the follow-up materials. So with that, I will share the bios of our presenters. Jessica Culley has been working with grassroots community organizations both internationally and in the US over the past 15 years. During that time, she has worked with CATA, the Farmworkers Support Committee, as a community organizer around workers' rights, pesticide safety, health education, immigration policy, civil rights, human rights, and other issues as well. Leila Borrero Krouse has been a stalwart provider of services to immigrants throughout the Delmarva region for the past 25 years. Since 2013, she has been working with CATA, the Farmworkers Support Committee, as a community organizer and a BIA-certified immigration specialist. Previously, she worked as an immigration specialist at Catholic Charities, where she earned a reputation as one of our community's most trusted and dedicated legal service providers. In recognition of Ms. Borrero Krouse's work, the Maryland Governor's Commission on Hispanic Affairs honored her with the Faith-Based Champion Award in 2010. Ms. Borrero Krouse was also named to the Governor's Commission on Hispanic Affairs in the 1990s. We are so grateful that Leila and Jessica are here with us today. We welcome you and we thank you for your time and sharing your expertise with us today. And so please take it away. Oh, I'm sorry, Jessica. I just unmuted you, so would you start again? Thank you.
Yeah. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jessica, and we're really happy to be with you today and during this webinar.
Yes. Thank you very much for letting us do the presentation, and welcome.
So we're going to jump right in, and Leila's going to do our first few introductory slides.
Well, for many of you who may not know CATA, CATA is a nonprofit organization, and it's mainly comprised from farm workers and immigrants in the community that we work. We are in 3 states, Maryland, being here in Salisbury, our local office, in Glassboro, New Jersey, Bridgeton, New Jersey, and Kennett Square, Pennsylvania. In Salisbury, we have a variation of farm workers, and they do poultry workers and farm agriculture workers and fruit, vegetables, and nurseries in this area. In Kennett Square, they have the mushroom workers, and in Glassboro and Bridgeton, New Jersey, is fruits and vegetables and orchards and also some nurseries. We are, our mission is very happy to, to engage farm workers and immigrants in the community. They are interested in having a better life and to learn more about the legal rights in every aspect of their lives, work, living, legal status, and everything else that surrounds their well-being in the United States. Our members are mainly farm workers and immigrants, and we have farm workers from all Central America, Mexico, Caribbean. We have a lot of people from Haiti as well in this community. We do most of our work is workers' rights and minimum wages, and making sure that their minimum wage sometimes is not clear to them, especially when they work with piece rate. And we try to educate them to learn how to compound that with the minimum wage in the areas that they work. Health and safety training, specifically in pesticide training. And we support our workers in organizing to empower themselves and to learn more about every condition that they live in the area of work. We do immigration and community organizing and advocacy. We have a basic immigration services, and mainly is temporary protected status. And temporary protected status is for those workers that or families that come into the United States and have country conditions, such as in Haiti with the hurricane or earthquake, in their countries. We help with citizenship, family petitions. We help with passport applications and renewal of the legal permanent resident or work authorization card. We help in building the community and the leadership to seek a better changes in the immigrant laws. And of course, we have the food justice, where we try to help them in education, especially in the agroecology, promoting fair labor. We help with awareness to the workers about the pesticide, the nutrition, and health benefits with the food justice, sustainable agriculture, and fair labor. We also are promoting gardens in our community that will help the nutrition in the families to eat better and live better. Also to engage into, with the workers, with other workers, and to the employers to better living conditions and better employment conditions as well.
So we wanted to use the benefits of technology here. And so we have a poll question for everyone that I believe will be launched here in a moment to just see who among our attendees have some experience with the farm worker community. Do I need to do anything, Yona?
No, so the results should be up with 44% saying yes, they have experience with the farm worker community, and 56% saying no.
Somehow I missed it. But that's okay. Maybe it's because my screen is in presentation mode. So 44% of you all do have some experience with the farm worker community. That's really awesome. Okay. So I feel like for a lot of you, some of what we're talking about is not new, and it'll be interesting to engage in the discussion at the end with you and see what your questions are. So I wanted to bring us back to the Chesapeake Foodshed Network's vision statement that Yona actually shared at the beginning during her introduction. And when I read this, I was like, whoa, this is an awesome vision statement, because it goes beyond just sustainable, talking about creating a sustainable food system to including the words resilient, inclusive, and equitable. But it's always interesting to me, like when we throw a lot of these words around, trying to figure out what that actually means on the ground, right? Like, so what are we actually pushing for, and how do we comprehensively do that? In our work with our members, as we've grown over the years from being an organization that started talking about mostly labor conditions to growing into talking more about pesticides and the effects of pesticides on the environment and on farm workers' bodies, and then really into talking about like the accessibility of our community to healthy food, and the fact that many times farm workers, even though they're the people growing our food, are the people with the least access to really healthy food. So we've built this definition for us of what food justice is, of food that really hits the sweet spot of a food that's healthy for our bodies and for the environment, that's accessible to the community, but which is also produced with fairness, right? And so the question of what does fair mean? What does it mean to produce food with fairness, and who is it fair for, right? Who all is involved in the production of our food. There's family farmers, there's can be interns on farms, there's farm workers on farms, there's also the consumers. So I want to share with you why it is a little bit that CATA has focused so much over a number of years on the local food movement and the sustainable food movement. Partially it's because that's the farms that are in our region. The farms in New Jersey and in Maryland tend to be smaller scale farms. We're not looking at large industrial farms like they have in Florida and California. But the reality is that sometimes because of that difference, the realities of workers on those farms have been very glossed over. This quote is kind of long. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's from a book called Labor and the Locavore, written by an academic up in New York State named Margaret Gray, who did a number of years doing really extensive interviews with workers throughout the Hudson Valley, which has a very similar type of farming community in the terms that it's a lot of smaller and medium scale farms, a lot of which sell in farmers markets as well as other outlets. But that's what she realized is that there had been this she calls it the agrarian vision of soil and soil harmony. You know, it's the farmer on the tractor with his overalls, that this sort of idealized, romanticized vision of the family farm that has very much made invisible the fact that many, many, many of these farms have workers, have hired labor of some sort, from as little as one or two to as many as on some of our farms in New Jersey, where we have upwards of 300 farm workers. So that's the reality that we've found too, that the conditions faced by farm workers on those farms are often lost in translation as we build a local food movement that gets really super excited, but that doesn't actually know very much about the conditions of farm workers. And the reality is that those conditions have largely been defined by a system that works against or works to disadvantage both small and medium-sized farmers as well as the farm workers on those farms. So that a lot of the prevailing conditions we find on even smaller farms are ones that have been defined by the practices used by big industrial farms. So Leila's gonna, before Leila talks actually, we have another poll question. And Yona, since I don't necessarily see the results, like after you launch it, would you be able to share the results verbally with us?
Definitely, yes. And so I'm just going to launch it now. I'm going to leave this up for a little bit more time. I think people are thinking through this one.
Okay, cool.
Okay, great. We'll close it in just a couple seconds. Okay, so the results are that 8% chose pesticides, 27% immigration, 58% wages, and 8% other.
That's really, it's really interesting. There was no right or wrong answer to this question. I think all of these things are concerns for farm workers. But I think you, for the most part, as an audience, you hit the nail on the head that when you talk with workers about their biggest concerns, the things that first come up are often immigration and wages. So Leila's going to spend a little bit of time just talking about sort of from her experience, what are a lot of the common issues affecting farm workers on farms, particularly here in the Eastern Shore, since we are doing this presentation for the Chesapeake Foodshed Network. But and that's where her experience is, but also I think most of what she is going to share is pretty widely applicable to the entire area where CATA does work.
Yes, some of the issues for the workers I've experienced or voiced concerns to us, and the poultry industry has been here in the local news mainly about breaks issues. They are not allowed to take breaks, and safety, especially with the industrial facilities that they work, the fast pace that they have to work is dangerous, and it brings a lot of issues for health, especially a lot of rapid movement with their hands, and sometimes the lack of safety gear that deals with, especially cutting the chickens in the poultry industry. In the farms, it's a little bit of everything, from brakes to safety equipment, or mainly gears to our pesticide. The lack of, not having the proper gear to apply the pesticide, all the training. The lack of transparency in contracts. Many of them do not know who they work for or where they come to work. They brought here from other areas, and sometimes there's workers from Mexico with special visas. They don't know their employer. They know their contractor, but they don't know precisely who is their big boss. Transportation issues. Many times they're transported to the work site in wagons, which brings a concern for safety. Then the substandard housing. Sometimes they're overcrowded. Many times they're located in the farms close where they're exposed to pesticides as well. The wages is one thing, because if they work for piece rate, and sometimes they don't know exactly how much they're getting paid for piece rate, and they equally amount to their hourly wages. The legal status is, and you indicated their immigration concern. The other part in the farms is the bathrooms. They don't have access to bathrooms, the drinking water, where they're supposed to be by law complying with cups to have cold drinking water, soap to wash their hands, or places they can wash their hands properly and have hand towels to dry their hands. Or, when they use the bathroom, they're supposed to have a facility where it's supplied with all these things. Most of them at the long hours and exposed to the weather conditions. The long hours in the state of Maryland for overtime is after 60 hours in the state of Maryland if they work in agriculture. If they work in packing or canning, is a different situation, especially if they packing for somebody else, for other farmers. But most of their concerns is the lack of transparency and in constant changes of the laws to them. They need to have somebody come to them and explain, and that's what we do mainly when we conduct outreach to the farm workers in their the place of living, because we cannot conduct outreach in the place of work. We come where they live. Sometimes they're concerned about access to other organizations that provide services, such as clinics. They come in and do regular checkups for migrant workers. There is churches or social entities that come and provide services to them, and they're denied the access to them. So that brings a lot of issues to them that, barriers with language that they can express their concerns to the people that they can trust.
So I think you guys can see that there's like a lot of different things going on throughout agriculture, some of which are specific in certain industries, but oftentimes which even cross industries. And so going back to what I said before, I know that a lot of us are working really hard to create, to push for and advocate for ecologically more sustainable practices for the environment and for the quality of the food that we're consuming. But we have to remember that we can't assume that by pushing for these kinds of farms that we're inherently also supporting a different kind of labor practice. So we wanted to share a little bit about how it is that CATA has engaged in this work with sustainable farms. And our work with this has largely resulted in the creation of an organization called the Agricultural Justice Project, right? So the Agricultural Justice Project is an organization that has grown out of a history of more than 15 years now of really deep dialogue with farmers organizations and sustainable farming organizations around the country, including NOFA in the Northeast and Florida Organic Growers and the Rural Advancement Foundation. And it has been really very much based in a shared analysis of a system that systematically disadvantages both small and medium-sized farmers and sustainable farmers and farm workers. And understanding and grown out of an understanding that we have to somehow work together to create an alternative that will seek to recognize the issues that both of these groups are facing and sort of the shared difficulties. So that work over many years focused on creating a shared definition of what fairness in agriculture really looks like. And that happened over between 5 and 10 years with forums that happened nationally and internationally involving a whole variety of stakeholders, but focusing on both the farm worker and the farmer communities, and has resulted in a document called the Social Justice Standards in Sustainable and Organic Agriculture, which has formed the backbone of the standards that is used by the Food Justice Certification Program. So Food Justice Certification is a third-party certification, and it's sometimes an interesting road to know if that was ever the original intent to create another certification, but it's where the work has led to at this point in time, with the hope that it'll grow into more than a certification. But the standards that have been worked out over all this time with the input of many stakeholders covers a whole variety of things, from issues relating to workers, including fair wages and benefits, workplace health and safety, relating to housing for farm workers, and the right to the freedom of association, or the workers' rights to organize, as well as the right for farmers to organize, to negotiate fair and equitable contracts with buyers, and to receive a fair price for their products. So as obviously we are a farm worker organization, so we want to share a little bit more about what the fair labor practices piece of the standards used by Food Justice Certification. How do we define fair labor practices? A lot of the original input into the standards around labor on farms came out of really deep work with our membership as an organization, and specifically with a group of workers who was organizing in a mushroom farm in Pennsylvania when they were determining what they wanted in their first labor contract. And so over the years, this has like grown, and it's had like input from quite a number of other farm worker organizations around the country, and it's always been worked out in dialogue and in negotiation with other stakeholders. But so some of the really basic or the foundational pieces of what do we mean by fair labor practices is the first thing is the freedom of association and the right to collective bargaining. And this one can be really scary for people sometimes, I think, talking about the right of workers to organize. We are not necessarily, the standards do not require workers to form a union on any farm, but the history of labor protections in the United States is one that has consistently excluded farm workers from almost every piece of major labor legislation that has ever been passed, and whose farm workers have come to sort of be covered by something through later legislation or through state laws. But in the 1930s, and since there's a lot of you who are familiar with farm worker issues news, but in the 1930s, when labor legislation was being written and promoted by FDR, he made a compromise with Southern Democrats who said they would not support this legislation if it included both domestic workers, the people working in homes, and farm workers. And so they agreed to exclude those two groups of people. It was entirely based on racial discrimination at that point in time. Those people in the South were African Americans doing that work. And over time, it has continued to be a history and a legacy of racial discrimination. And so foundational for our understanding of fair labor practices is that workers must always, in all cases, have the protected right to organize, to advocate for themselves directly with their employer. We also ask all employers to put into place a procedure for resolving conflicts and grievances, and for that procedure to be very clearly communicated and for the workers to be trained in. We have our standards cover that the ideal is that all workers would receive a living wage. We know that on many farms that is sadly not the reality, the economic reality of a farm to be able to pay a living wage, and so there is a process in place for a farmer to share their financial information with the workers in the farm and to work together on how they could work over time to increase wages. There are standards that deal with housing and the conditions of the housing if it's provided to workers, because there's a history of really horrible farm worker housing and still today, as well as a lot of protections for health and safety, transparency in work policies. It seems, I think for a lot of farms, it was having all of the policies and procedures of the farm written down is a challenge. But we know that particularly as farms grow and you move from having only a handful of workers with whom the farmer communicates every day to having a larger crew, that having things written down and for it to be transparent with all workers and for there to be a clear understanding of how things operate and what to do if you need time off and things like that is really important. AZP actually provides a good deal of technical assistance, and there's a free toolkit available to any farm that has like a whole template for the policies and procedures that we think most businesses, most farms would want to have, and that they can use to adapt to their own reality. So that's sort of, I mean, there's a lot more in the document itself that describe the standards used by food justice certification, but that's a pretty good overview of what's important to us as an organization and to a lot of other worker organizations when we're advocating for fair labor practices. And we're going to sort of wrap up our sharing right now, and we sort of invite people to comment on like how do we work to build support for sustainable farms that want to or are offering dignified work for both the farmers and the farm workers, because I think this is really the crux of it. Right now we have a handful of farms and businesses around the country. The food justice certification isn't only available to farms, but also to any food business in the food chain. And we know that sort of having the full chain is important because it's the retailers and things like that who can provide the support for farms to go through this process. But so I think, you know, like it's been a process that the uptake's been slower than we would like because it's very comprehensive. But it is a standard that creates a high bar that we believe really strongly in. That is what we want to create. It's the vision we have for the food system and that we want to see. So I think, you know, we have this question for folks is just like, how do we build support for sustainable farms that are doing this kind of providing this dignified employment to folks, and then also just to invite you to share your questions.
Great, Jessica and Leila. So that was so informative, and I learned a great deal. I really appreciate the presentation. And this is Christy, and I did collect up some comments that I wanted to share one with you, and a couple questions that I've received. And one was from Lauren, and she said she has tremendous respect for the work of CATA. And her comment is, though I've been confused or concerned about the certification versus the platform created by CIW, and that stands for the I hope I don't get this, slaughter this, but the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, is that right? Perhaps
Immokalee.
you know?
Yeah.
Immokalee. Sorry, I knew I was going to get it wrong. But at any rate, do you care? Could you provide some thoughts along those lines, either one of you?
Yeah, I can respond to this a little bit. There are some major similarities between the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, for folks who may not be familiar, is an organization of tomato workers in southern Florida that has worked over a number of years on something they call the Fair Food Campaign, where they've pressured major corporations to sign legally binding agreements that they will only buy tomatoes from farms that meet a certain code of conduct, and that they will also then pass along a premium of 1 penny per pound to the workers, per pound of tomatoes picked. So there's some major like crossovers between our standards and the code of conduct used by the Immokalee workers in terms of, like, you know, the not allowing for any discrimination, like for increases in wages, in terms of health and safety protections. There's a few major differences. One being that the CIW Code of Conduct does not address the use of pesticides beyond the compliance with worker health and safety. So there's no question about like what pesticides are okay or not okay to use, but there is an ability for the workers have to have the appropriate health and safety training. They have to have the appropriate equipment, and they are allowed to refuse to work if they believe that their health is being put at risk. So in comparison, AJP at this point in time has worked mainly with organic farms, and we're looking to pilot an IPM protocol for farms that are using integrated pest management, because we really believe that there are just some chemicals that are perfectly legal to use in the United States, but that workers should never be exposed to. The other major difference, I would say, between AJP and the CIW Code of Conduct is that the use of the penny per pound payment has supported or it makes very concrete the use of a piece rate payment to workers. Piece rate is something that has been shown over a long time to be very detrimental to workers' health. It is inherently discriminatory against women workers, against older workers, against workers with any sort of disability, because your wages are completely based on your ability to produce. And so some workers can actually earn quite a good deal of money during harvest season, but it's based on them exploiting their own bodies to do so. And so under the AJP regulations, piece rate is not completely, it's not prohibited, although it is very, very highly discouraged, and there's a certain number of protections in place for workers who are earning that, and where other workers should be earning similar kinds of wages, because we believe that ideally we would eliminate the use of piece rate payment, because it does really, it's one way of having workers exploit themselves and their own health. So those are the two sort of major differences. And then the other difference in CIWs, whatever, is that they have this binding agreement with corporations, means that that farms lose contracts, which is a difficult reality. It's not as much of a partnership as AJP really tries to approach working with farmers as a partnership. It is very much, it means that farms are doing it. Farms are using this code of conduct. I think there's above 90% of the tomato farms in Florida are participating in the Fair Food Program, and it's had very positive results for workers.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Jessica. And I guess I think this question is about this topic as well, and I apologize if this is in the wrong order, but I had a question from Marla, who wanted to know what you saw as the role of policy in building support for sustainable ag for both those target groups.
I think it's been an interesting dialogue over time with a number of our farmer partners and advocates of figuring out how do we create a joint policy platform that really addresses both the concerns of farm workers for better labor conditions, as well as the need of farmers for better pricing for products that really actually covers their cost of production. And I don't think we've come up with the magic bullet. There's a number of projects around the country working on institutional procurement and looking at how do we use our public dollars to support farms and businesses that are offering better labor practices in terms of not necessarily providing a better price, but providing a preference option of some sort for some farms over others. But I think it's something that's still sort of being worked out. like what that common policy platform really looks like.
And along those lines, what recommendations would either one of you have around building bipartisan support around these issues?
Does anybody else have an answer for that one? I'm not sure that I have a great answer for that one.
Okay. Well, in fact, in the audience, if you do and you care to comment, we'd be happy to collect those up, and we will share the questions along with any comments that you have that we don't have time to cover today. We will send those back out to the registrants. So feel free to provide your comments in the question panel of your GoToMeeting control panel.
Yeah, and I realize that there may be a bunch of questions that come up later, so I know that you'll be sharing our contact information, and we really do welcome some sort of like continued dialogue around like how do we do this stuff, right? Because they're complex issues.
Wonderful, thank you. Here's another question for you too. How can I, as a member of the food justice movement, bring awareness and engagement with farm workers' rights and current treatment? And then that question's followed up with, I feel like there is a lot of people, power, and money fighting for good, sustainable food and access to such food for all people, which should be backing workers' rights, but it seems to have disappeared within the discussions, even the discussions around race and food justice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think there's a couple of different things. I think one is that on a lot of the work that we're doing with sustainable farms, how can we start to get a baseline about what labor conditions really look like? Because I want to approach. I think generally I want to approach most farmers in making the assumption that they want to provide a good place to work to people. And so, and then what are the challenges that they're having in doing that? And I think there's been a resistance or to really asking questions to farmers around labor with a fear of creating a negative or an antagonistic relationship. And so I think from organizational perspectives of organizations that are working with farmers is really how do we work together to start getting a baseline on some of these things and what farmers would like to work on improving themselves, and then how to support that. From a consumer perspective, which is maybe I'm not sure the perspective of the person who asked the question, I think is supporting. There's a number of campaigns around the country. We have one right now in New Jersey to raise the minimum wage, and we keep being told that there's this very good possibility that even our friendly Democratic legislators will do a carve out for both young workers, like teenage workers, as well as for farm workers. And so how do we, at this point in time, we're working with our New Jersey legislators to avoid this, but there may come a point in time where we do put out a call to people to really be in touch with their legislators about avoiding that. And we know that raising the minimum wage is hard, can be hard on businesses and things like that, but it is something that's graded in over time and has been shown generally across the country to not result in the massive closing of businesses. And so, so I think as consumers is to be aware of those kinds of workers campaigns that are happening and how to support.
Thank you very much. Here's a statement that perhaps you'd like to comment on from Lorian, and it's, I want to believe that CIW, Fair Food Campaign, and similar consumer-driven certification schemes. So, but they're starting to get skeptical. So I think they want to believe in them, but this person's starting to get skeptical after 2 years focusing on just a few companies, being Wendy's, Publix, as examples. I very much want to see an organization working on policy solutions that will allow a level playing field for small and large farms. I just think better legal worker protections are needed rather than simple fair label certification schemes which are driven by consumer choice. Are you all working on anything along those lines, or do you have a comment on this person's statement?
I mean, I think making sure that small and medium scale farms are competitive, like can compete with large scale farms, is really important. I think the CIW program has had really incredible results. I don't want to, you know, I encourage y'all to check out the Fair Food Standards Council's work and what that has meant, because although the targets of the public campaigns have been corporations, the companies participating are tomato farms in Florida. But I do agree that there needs to be a way of not addressing things necessarily so piecemeal, like farm by farm, corporation by corporation. Although that is what has generated some results in recent years, you know. But yes, I think figuring out how to address things. Right now, we're part of a couple of different national initiatives. One is called the Good Food for All, and one is a coalition building effort called HEAL, which stands for Health, Environment, Agriculture, and Labor, which are both trying to think about this, like what is a comprehensive policy platform that will address sort of a lot of different aspects, including both farmer issues as well as labor issues, as well as consumer, specifically equitable access issues. And so, like, you know, it's that Venn diagram I showed at the beginning, right? Like figuring out what that sweet spot is, where these things come together, and what we have to push on all fronts to make that happen.
Yeah, and then as an example, Lauren shared that corporations have the ability to make swifter changes in legislation many times. And Lauren also mentioned that the United Farm Workers, I think that's correct, what the acronym stands for, that they have just worked hard to pass the overtime pay for farm workers in California.
It's so exciting. Yeah.
Okay.
Farm workers get overtime of 40 hours in California. It's kind of amazing. I don't think anybody knew if it would actually happen.
Nice. All right. So some really good news being shared today, and then finally, just one quick question from the group is: someone from the group was wondering if you were working with Migrant Justice and their Milk with Dignity campaign.
So a number of our organizations, we all have relationships with each other through different national coalitions and alliances, specifically CIW, Migrant Justice in Vermont, which is a Vermont-based organization for folks who don't know, working mostly with dairy workers. They're doing a campaign that's very similar to the CIW's Fair Food campaign called Milk with Dignity against Ben & Jerry's, trying to get Ben & Jerry's to sign a legally binding agreement with them. We're all members of the Food Chain Workers Alliance, and so we all sort of collaborate in that space, sharing each other's models and trying to learn from each other and how to like achieve things for the farm worker community.
Great. Well, thank you both again very much for spending the little bit of this afternoon with us. I will be handing this over to Yona, and before doing so, I would like to just remind folks that there are 2 handouts that you all can get in the GoToWebinar control panel. The attendees can get in the GoToWebinar control panel, and we will be following up with any unanswered questions or comments. We do appreciate all of the contributions that we received from those of you who joined us today. So thank you very much. And Jessica and Leila, again, thank you as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, great, really great work.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to jump in with another round of thank yous. Leila and Jessica, this was such a fantastic presentation and also a fantastic question and answer session. So I think it's clear that these issues in discussion are really hitting a nerve, and the Chesapeake Foodshed Network keeps hearing this, and we aim to continue dialogue on the issues of fair labor practices and farm worker rights on farms of all sizes. And Jessica and Leila, I just wanted to also thank you for drawing our attention particularly to smaller and medium-sized farms. It's just been such a rich discussion and full of your insights, and we really want to thank you for your time and also give people a way to continue to engage around this topic. And so I'll just share some next steps. CATA will be, or rather at the Future Harvest CASA conference in January of 2017, then Elizabeth Henderson will be a keynote speaker. And Elizabeth Henderson is a farmer, author, and one of the founders of AJP. And so that's really exciting. And we're also interested in further programming that attendees and registrants would like to see. And so we'll send out a very short post-webinar survey. We'd really appreciate it if you would fill it in and give us feedback on this, but also on what else you would like to see on this topic, on these topics rather. Leila and Jessica also shared a lot of resources and links. I'm going to put up this list here, and then on the next slide, there's a whole lot more resources and links. We'll be sending these out with all the follow-up material, so you don't need to scramble to get any of this right now, but just to show you that there is a wealth of information out there and ways to dig in deeper into these topics and continue the conversation. We also encourage you to follow Chesapeake Foodshed Network on Twitter and sign up for our email list. And you can do that by just going to chesapeakefoodshed.net. And we'll keep you up to date on these issues and others. Wanted to thank all the registrants or all the attendees for attending, and really thank you for your interest and for joining us. And one more thank you to the presenters for sharing your experience and your expertise. As has been said a couple times, we'll be following up next week with all of the materials that were shared today and then some other follow-up ones. And finally, I'll just note that if you want to serve as a resource expert for a coffee talk, or if you have ideas about a coffee talk that you'd like to see, please be in touch with us. Christy's contact information is up on this slide. We'd love to hear from you about this or other topics. And just wanted to draw your attention to some upcoming events of the Chesapeake Foodshed Network. Next week, we have a water cooler Twitter chat on farm to institution, including topics around food equity. Our next month's coffee talk is on farm to childcare. We're really excited to learn more about that. And in December, we're hearing about tools and strategies to facilitate access to land for the next generation of farmers. And so farm worker justice and issues of equity are certainly going to be part of those as well, or they could be. And later in the fall and in the spring, we have some other events that please be on the lookout for. We are always excited to hear from you and to help to bring out your interests and issues to the fore. And so please do be in touch. We really thank you for your time and your interest and hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you so much, everyone.